Sure, so I'll just kick us off really quick. Hey everyone, my name is Laura Patel. I'm the Director of Enterprise Sales with Density and also the Vice Chair of CoreNet's Programming and Outreach Committee. Since the middle of March, when shelter in place first began here in New York City, CoreNet really stepped up our virtual programming, and we've since organized and hosted nearly 150 virtual events, the crown jewel of which continues to be our plugged in sessions on Wednesday, which is what you've all joined us for here today, where we offer really more of like a deep dive into a timely and relevant topic. And we offer insights from esteemed industry experts like the ones you're going to hear from this afternoon or this evening, depending on where you're joining us from. In June, our team assembled an incredible panel to unpack the learnings that have been gleaned so far from Asia Pacific. And today we're going to highlight EMEA's experiences and responses to COVID-19, understanding kind of the evolution of events, the response, the lessons learned along the way, kind of what happened, what's changed, what's on the horizon, and most importantly, what does America have to learn from the experience abroad? If you enjoy today's event, just a quick plugged in for our plugged in events, which again are every Wednesday. Next week, we're going to be highlighting the important topic of diversity and inclusion in real estate from a leader's perspective and featuring speakers from Condé Nast, Colliers, ANC Networks, and JLL. And a final housekeeping note, unlike many of the webinars that I'm sure we're all almost tired, but not quite tired of because they're most of our only connection to the outside world, we've chosen not to have these plugged in events in a typical webinar format. And what I mean by that is we want to encourage audience participation. So with that in mind, we ask that everyone keep their audio and video switched off during the formal event, but you will constantly have access to your chat functions if you want to engage with some of your fellow attendees or ask questions. And Nishar and Thomas are going to be collecting your questions as we go through, and then at the end, we'll have a guided Q&A. So with that, I'll hand things over to your hosts and we'll get the show on the road. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Laura.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you very much, Laura, once again. And thank you, CoreNet Chapter, for this amazing opportunity for us to continue our virtual world tour through the format of this panel discussion. And as you mentioned, Laura, earlier, we had an Asia Pacific panel from Singapore, India, and China. And it was very well received. So we thought, why don't we continue the tour across the globe and bring a unique perspective from the European leaders as well. So here we go, two of your chapters, International Young Leaders. Thomas and I are going to co-moderate today's session. And by the way of introduction, I'm Nishar Fatema. I manage global accounts for a company called Space Matrix. And Space Matrix supports North American and European organizations to design and build their spaces and workplaces in APAC. But I've been in New York for 5 years, and why do I qualify for moderating this session? So just to give a little background on, actually I've spent early part of my career in South Germany, in a small town called Stuttgart, and had an opportunity to travel across the Europe and learn about the culture and people and places. But more so than me, my co-moderator Thomas has a very special connection. So I would rather let him share his story about the connection with Europe. And why don't you go ahead and introduce our panel as well later, Thomas. Over to you.
Sure. Hello, everyone. So I'm Thomas Baade-Mathiesen. I guess my European connection is that I was born and raised there. So I grew up in Norway with family in Scotland and moved on to start becoming a grown-up in Italy, and then eventually I ended up in Boston to do my MBA. And the gravitational force is very strong in New York, and so that's where I've ended up. Now, I didn't hear that, but in any case, I would like to introduce the panel, and I think, briefly. So I work with Altanova. It's a sustainability consulting firm. So we help companies.
I can't hear. Well, they're not supposed to hear me. They said that they muted me.
There we go. Right. So we help companies select, design, develop, and operate their real estate more sustainably. And I oversee our corporate engagements. So we do that in New York, but we do it also globally. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm very excited to learn about what the panel has to say from EMEA today. So what's interesting about this panel, I think there are lots of things that are interesting about it. One is the fact that we have 3 heads of real estate that are going to be commenting on the more general view, the strategic view of a real estate and workplace portfolio. The other interesting thing is that we have a workplace anthropologist with us. So I'm going to leave that there and let her tell us a little bit more about what that is. And we have a head of innovation and workplace technology. So we've basically got the CRE angle, we've got a focus on the human element, and we've got a focus on the technological element, which are really 2 big drivers in everything that is going on now when it comes to COVID response and what we expect coming on from here. So without further ado, Agne, would you like to start and introduce yourself? Just tell us a little bit about what is your role, what does that actually entail day to day, and how did COVID tie into that?
Sure. So first of all, hi everyone, greetings from windy Copenhagen. I'm delighted to be part of this panel, and thank you Nishar and Thomas for inviting me to join. And just a quick question, you hear me properly? Sound is fine?
Perfect.
Good. So I continue. I'm Agne Zemaite, a workplace anthropologist at Danske Bank. I'm a part of a corporate real estate where I see my role as an internal consultant who contributes to project teams by designing and implementing usability, quality, evaluation framework for different aspects of Danske Bank premises, office space, work environment, facility, service concepts. But most importantly, I contribute with key insights about our end users, so our employees' experience. I combine ethnographic toolbox, interview, focus group, observation with quantitative methods, surveys, and utilization data to reveal patterns for strategic decisions that hopefully create value. So as you can hear, my scope was very much related to the physical workplace before the pandemic. While during it, the understanding of work got disrupted and change got accelerated. So I think we see a decade of change management that happened over a couple of days, and work is not a place anymore, it is an activity. So the scope of my job obviously got broadened lately. And what's more exciting, it got more futuristic. So I think we are cooking how the future of work will look like.
Very good. Well, that left us with more questions than answers, and I'm sure that's going to continue. So, Cesar, why don't you open our minds to even more questions about who you are and what you do?
Sure, no problem. I'm glad you got the name right. So it's Cesar Jeri, aka Cesar Jeri, as some people do know me. So yeah, my role in Verizon is essentially looking at, from an innovation and technology angle, how is real estate being disrupted using technology. Technology, we see it as an enabler, and how we actually activate different experiences, or how we trend towards a more of autonomous type buildings, or as I call it, the analog, from going from analog to digital. So what I do most of the time is I keep on scouting from different technologies, especially any kind of emerging technologies out there, and how they fit into our general workplace strategy. What experiences do we want to create, what solutions, what problems do we want to solve for, and then whether we actually want to solve for them digitally. For the second part of your question, what we see COVID doing, I mean, most of us will agree with this, is we've been massively disrupted. What it means for us in digital is essentially renders every single data set, and we had a lot of them for the past 10 years that we were looking at workplace, have been rendered completely irrelevant. So what that means in the future is, what are we going to be doing with new data sets, and how are we going to be, more importantly, shaping the future of work? Because I see this as a white canvas opportunity, where all of the past behaviors have been gone for the last 6 months, and now we can focus on the new behaviors and how technology enables them.
Wow. Thank you, Cesar. Nelle, do you want to continue on next?
Sure, thank you, Thomas. And I'd also, like Agne, really like to thank you for giving us the opportunity to be here. I really look forward, especially to the Q&A piece at the end. So my name is Nelle Machiels. I'm based in Switzerland, working for Novartis. my role is heading the global strategy and alliance team for real estate. And that actually means that we have 3 key focus areas. Number 1, as it says already, the strategy of the business and of the company, understanding that and translating it, what it means to our real estate portfolio, our real estate workplace, but also our services that we deliver in there. Secondly, we are responsible to making sure that all our people around the globe that work in real estate have one common set of processes, tools, and systems. And then last but not least, the alliance piece, we've concluded a partnership globally with CBRE, and that is ultimately managed through me and my team, but very much executed, of course, in the regions and on the ground. So that's a bit of me, and as you can see, COVID has impacted massively what we need to do in strategy, what we need to change in strategy, but also our daily execution. So the collaboration with CBRE and how they could help us has been really top of the agenda in the last 6 months.
Wow, that's a lot of responsibility, Nelle. And I also hear rumors that you're one of the favorite CoreNet faculty out there. So look out for her and her lectures if you follow any of the CoreNet educational programs.
Thank you.
All right, let's take the trip on to Germany, to central Germany. Christian, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Love to. Thank you, Thomas, for the opportunity to talk to this group. Yeah, my name is Christian Scheier. I'm the global head of workplaces for Adidas. That in workplaces, what we have combined there is basically the classical corporate real estate and the facility management. So my team is responsible for everything from starting to look for a location to designing, building that location, and later on operating it. On the corporate world, which is our offices, showrooms, and distribution centers. We actually just combined this department into one, finally, at the beginning of the year, and I took over this role just in time to be hit by one of the biggest crises we ever had, which was an interesting experience, of course. I was running the corporate real estate department before that, so I was very used to open buildings and design and construct them. Now I started my new role of actually closing down our facilities all around the globe. That was, yeah, it was a good learning curve. Also, a very interesting opportunity to hit the ground running. Yeah, now we are at the point where we most of our locations are open around the globe again. We'll see how long that holds, and especially part of the topic later on can be how we see the situation in Germany develop or in Europe in general. Yeah. But coincidentally, actually, one of our major locations to just closed is in the US. So that's, I think it's not a topic only for some locations. It's still a global pandemic, which we see every day.
Well, so maybe you will share a little bit more of that as an example. So far, we've been in Denmark, we've been in Switzerland, we've been in London, and we've been in Germany. And the last but not least, we're going to head to Scotland. Stephen, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello, everybody. My name is Stephen Higgins. I live and work in Glasgow, Scotland. I am responsible as director for the EMEA, Europe, Middle East, Africa portfolio, property portfolio for the company. Very diverse region. We do everything from Johannesburg to Oslo to Kazakhstan. So it pretty much covers maybe a quarter of the globe. We've got 56 offices, lots of different cultural considerations, all of the currency. We don't have a big square feet portfolio, but we have lots of mid-range and small office locations that are, to be honest, just as demanding as running a big location. Happy to join via the CoreNet invitation. As Nelle said, through this, where we strive to be strategic and business aligned and user-friendly, and user experience is all part and parcel of delivering corporate real estate to the company. The last 6 months, 9 months has been a daily flurry of activities around closing, preparing to reopen, reopening, closing again. Everybody, company top right down, everybody's interested in when we get back to the office. But more difficult, everybody's got an opinion now. Everybody's got an opinion about what safety is, about what experience is. Before we were very successfully doing smart workplace transformation. Our attempt to standardise and introduce agile working across the company, and very successfully adopted. Lots of resistance to change, as there always is. However, we felt that the company was going in the right direction, and we were delivering fantastic spaces that had multiple ways of using them. So it's not stalled as such, it's still our aspiration. But as I say, everybody's got an opinion. They're volunteering those opinions of what's right and wrong. And some people actually hark back to old ways of working. And would that be safer? And should we go back the way? So hopefully we'll explore that in the conversation. So, and if you get the chance to listen to Nelle lecture, she makes finance fun.
Great.
So that's me.
Well, thank you very much. And I think you highlighted something that is very interesting with this panel. I'm not going to say that the Americas are not diverse, but Europe certainly is as well, and the rest of the EMEA region. And that's one of the main points of this session today, is to draw comparisons between locations. So Nishar, I think you have something you want to investigate there.
Absolutely. I think the diversity is the key. But before we all are curious to learn about corporate real estate and in different countries and different regions. But before we reach there, I would love to understand, because I know for the fact that we are not going to be able to travel to Europe anytime soon, right? So if you could give us what like a good perspective about, like a quick summary about what's happening currently with regards to COVID in each of your country where you're sitting at the moment. And we can go in the same sequence. Agne, if you want to start and share a little bit about what's happening in Copenhagen.
So we are experiencing the second wave of the coronavirus, and even though during the summer most of the measures against it were lifted, and we managed to enjoy quite an ordinary summer, maybe with a bit less of traveling, but still quite full of joy. So now again we are going into more of a second wave phase, and it is mandatory to wear a face mask in the public transport and restaurants and cafes. Nightlife is limited. Bars and clubs need to be closed at 10 p.m. Of course, there is a ban for big gatherings, and it is recommended by authorities for those who are able to do so to work remotely. So my colleagues and I are working remotely since the middle of September.
Great. Cesar, do you want to share what's happening in London?
Sure. Probably more UK, but I'm going to be careful not to, divulge many political opinions around this. But it's very similar to many other countries. We're going. This government is trying to do a few things, opening. We can see this happening and for the foreseeable future. Expansion and construction, second waves coming in, then elements closing out, high streets pretty much at dire straits. So there's a lot of impact. There's a lot of economical impact going on, even in the offices. I was in central London last week and going to the office, and it's sad to see some of the businesses being shut down. Company locations that I used to go, coffee shops that I used to go, that no longer exist. So that's the new reality, right? We have been significantly disrupted, and we will continue to be significantly disrupted for a while. And probably it's the same thing that is going on in the northern side of the UK as well.
Great. Is it different for you, Nelle, in your region? You are in mountains, so I think a lot of freedom. But if you talk about Basel and the other cities,
yeah, it's actually quite interesting. Switzerland is such a tiny country, but it has, I believe, 26 cantons, and every canton has their own rules. So the thing that is across the country similar is what Agne also said, that in public transport, so trains, trams, and everything, you have to wear a mask. But then in the other, like in shops, it's really dependent on which canton you are in, whether you need to wear a mask when you go to a shop. I think economically, Switzerland is dealing with the situation quite well. I think also there's a lot of discipline with people, that they keep distance, that they stay at home and they don't need to go out. So far, numbers are increasing a bit, but still under control, I would say.
Great to know. Christian?
Unmute button. So I think Germany, we saw a complete lockdown of the country in spring. I mean, for us in Hertz, so for example, for our global headquarters, we shut them down on March 17th and kept them closed for 2 months. And most stores, most locations were closed, and afterwards it's just reopened. And things got back to normal over summer. And what we're now seeing is clearly the second wave, like most other European countries. But I think the difference we're seeing now is that we are talking about local, hyper-local shutdowns rather than a countrywide shutdown. So we have areas which are high risk. I mean, Berlin is at the forefront, sadly enough. Our area here in Bavaria is still pretty okay. We're seeing certain areas taking steps, in some cases rather drastic steps on a local level. But it doesn't look right now that we are going for a complete shutdown. That's something the country definitely wants to avoid. And we'll have to see how successful we are at that. We are, for our locations, all our locations are currently open. All our stores in Germany are open, and all stores except 1 or 2 in Europe are open. So globally, it's about 94% of our stores which are open. So we clearly are still there, but the tension is tangible that things are not going as planned.
I think it's particularly interesting for your portfolio because part of it is retail, and that's going to take an impact as well, right? Last but not least, Stephen, do you want to share some insights about Glasgow?
Yep. So Glasgow and all of Scotland, we have pretty much been out of the office since March the 18th. The Scottish Government mandated that if you have the capability to work from home, then all businesses should enable employees to do that. Now, that was met with absolute compliance. Vast majority of businesses did not put up a case for going into the office. Some skill sets, some particular jobs, people did attend the office, but in very, very small numbers. So some of the guys touched on a normal summer, and it was close to normal in as much as people were out, there was activities allowed, sports had returned, but international travel was mostly banned across Europe. You couldn't come into Scotland either, so that did slow it down. And right now, all of the 4 governments in the UK are going back to higher levels of governance, really around stopping the travel, localised lockdowns. Glasgow included is in a local lockdown. We've been in a higher tier alert for the past week, and it's becoming even more severe. The second discussion about a proper lockdown, a full lockdown, is not being well received. So having eased off the rules during the summer, and people are, I'm hearing more of an outcry about what about business? What about the economy? We can't afford to do this. And the health versus wealth debate is really gathering traction here and becoming quite politically fractious. And to be honest, we get bulletins on TV and radio every 5 minutes, so it's all encompassing here. First time March through to August, people complied. Now people are more fed up, and there's a pushback, definitely a pushback. That personal worry, the dark nights are coming, the shorter days, the weather is changing. It was much easier to be in lockdown when you could use the garden and go for a walk. But particularly us in Northern Europe, we know what the long dark nights are like, and it's not inviting at all. So that's Scotland and Glasgow.
Thank you very much. I think we now have a pretty good overview of your countries, and I'm seeing some similarities already, but if we look at the differences, I think that's where things get really interesting, especially considering your international roles. So if one or two of you would be willing to share some of these contrasts, like are there any outlier countries that have a quite different response? You know, whether it's right or wrong, that doesn't really matter, but just recognizing that it's different. Can we take some lessons from that?
I can go.
Mm-hmm.
I would say at the beginning, there was a kind of fingers crossed approach from many countries that hopefully the virus doesn't land in their respective place. But we, being a global organisation, and we have factories in China, we were involved in corporate real estate for Lenovo was already involved. We also had a security role, and we were tracking our population that was travelling around the globe. So in a responsible manner first, we wanted to make sure that they were safe. We're not going to a country that would then, they would be locked down in a foreign country, somewhere away from home, couldn't get out for a period of time, but equally, we didn't want them exposed to the virus. But that very quickly and rapidly changed. When the virus hit Italy, Milan, and around Madrid in particular, those stories and the pictures that were circulating, events changed rapidly, and other countries sat up, took further notice, started to be ready, be prepared, and we started to really learn lessons from the countries that were first experiencing it. If we talk vast majority of Central Europe, it was a domino effect. It was happening, and you could track it over a period of a couple of weeks. Where would it pop up next? Where would it start? Where would the next rise be? And equally, you can follow that bell curve as countries started to come out of it. The two outliers I would say for Europe, Sweden, just in government direction, was, this is my opinion, it's not, I don't know, I can back it up with facts, but I thought Sweden was out of step with the rest of the Nordics. And flip that over, Iceland, yes, it's a remote island, yes, it's a big island, but they took steps almost immediately. They banned travel, they went into a real lockdown, and I thought they handled it all very, very well. So there is some outliers, and there is some, I'll call it national characteristics. If you've got governments that's led by the more popularist men, they could be quite bullish and quite unaccepting that it was going to happen. And then we have others that locked down immediately. So we've seen the wide range everywhere, and we've even today we have people denying that it's happening, and they get airtime on TV. So it's a bit bizarre. That's my general comments, what I see.
And maybe I can build on that about being different or being the same. So in Novartis, I was really surprised, to be honest. I'm now in the company for 3 years, and I knew that we have a department called NEM, Novartis Emergency Management, and normally you don't see them and you don't hear them, and that's good. But when the crisis hit, this team with their processes and manuals, they started operating, doing what they're supposed to do, and they were brilliant at it. So I think even before governments or countries could react, we clearly had a policy of our associates' safety goes first. We had mouth masks on stock in almost every place, so we could take care of those kind of things. Maybe being a pharma company, you kind of drilled on that element, but that really helped to make everybody feel safe from day one. And now this team is still very, very active, but now that we are like a couple of months in, the policy is we don't allow more than 50% of people into the buildings in general. So that's the maximum across the globe. But primarily focus, our priority now is local legislation. So we follow local guidelines and legislation. So if they say 30%, we stick to 30%. But then our company level is 50% people allowed in offices. And we have a regime. If numbers of infections per 100,000 go up, we need to go down with people allowed into the office. So that's very clear. I was really impressed with the process that sits behind this, and that turned out to work very well.
I think you brought a very interesting point, Nelle. So is it safe to assume that we are out of the operational recovery mode thinking, and now we are going into the optimization mode as an organization? And if you could share what's currently on top of your mind as a CRE leader when it comes to COVID response, now that we are 6 months into the pandemic.
So I would love to say that we're out of the emergency mode. I think we're not yet. When I hear people who I think I can trust with their judgment, this is going to take another 6 to 9 months before we have a vaccine, and everybody assumes when we have a vaccine, then probably we can go back to more of a normal like we used to. And I'm with Stephen. I think this is going to weigh on people now that we are going into autumn and winter. So that's one thing where I think we're not out of an emergency yet. But yes, what we are doing as corporate real estate, we're now trying, because we have it under control, how we need to deal with the emergency. Now we're looking at what's the long-term impacts. How are things going to fundamentally change? Is our portfolio going to fundamentally change? And maybe coincidence or not, but Novartis, since we have a new leader for about 2 years now, has gone on a cultural journey. And before COVID, we still were very much a company where people go to the office every day. And COVID also means an opportunity for us, because we've embarked on a journey of embracing working from home because we had to. But we're now investigating, and the program is called Choice with Responsibility. We're investigating how much can we make working from home part of our DNA, also deliberately, not because of COVID, but also deliberately what worked well or what works well in working from home, and how can we support that we continue doing so. So that's the choice piece. Associates have the choice to work from wherever they want, but with the responsibility to do it mindful, to do it in alignment with their managers and their team colleagues. So that's actually what we're focusing on now, understanding what that means and how we can make that a structural new normal.
Right, and people being the biggest force to get impacted, I think it naturally brings me to Agne to give a social or mental perspective of what is your take on when it comes to people-centric approach for COVID response.
Absolutely, I think it's you know, they are the ones who feel that the biggest impact. You know, our life has changed over a couple of nights, and we need to adapt to it. So it is a cultural journey. And I guess the starting point for many organizations were very different. I believe tech companies might be more prepared for it. Well, what I see us in the banking industry, we're really embracing the cultural journey, as Nelle mentioned. You know, it was quite usual to come to an office, and now we are not in office full for a full capacity the last 6 months. So it's a huge shift. The disruption is it touched everyone. But I think what is the most important for companies right now, because all of us are starting from different points and, you know, embracing different ways, the uncertain times. What the most important is to understand where we are and to have the pulse of the company. What do the employees think? And especially that the whole pandemic was quite hectic in a way, that regulations come, you know, they changes, there are different recommendations every week, and also companies need to follow that, and on top of that something else comes. So it's quite frustrating from employee perspective, and we were really curious to see what our employees in Danske Bank think about the reaction of the company to the crisis and the distributed workforce. So we keep a pulse on that by making a global group survey, and the results from the latest one actually were quite surprising, because we expected to be, I don't know, people be more negative or a bit more grumpy, because it's definitely not the most convenient thing to be working from home for 6 months without, you know, the proper office setup. And actually, they are very supportive. So that was a huge learning. You know, we have, how to say, we are all in the same journey, and we're trying to get the best out of it. So I think that's important to understand the pulse, you know, what kind of problems are we facing that week, that month, and act upon them, and also to be humble about it. Last week, actually this weekend, in our group A team in Lithuania held a virtual hackathon on the topic Future Workplace. And our leaders basically just said, we're in the same boat. We don't know what the future, you know, looks like, and can we together co-create it? You know, what tools do we need? So I think it's just fantastic how companies that you have seen quite hierarchical way of operating now changing the shift by being, I don't know, more human-centric and closer. And I think the good side of this pandemic, especially during looking into some of the companies, that it brought the equality in some sense, in some ways. You know, it took all the symbols of powers or away. There is no corner office anymore. There is no, I don't know, better position around the table anymore. We all the same square on Teams, on Skype, or on a Zoom. So there are no symbols left. So I think it's easier to approach the leaders, right? We are all same in our bedrooms on the couches.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Agne. Christian, do you want to share your thoughts from the perspective? Because as we are seeing for a lot of the comments taking from Asia Pacific, there were multi-generational families living in the same house, and hence the communication or taking a video calls from the same space was really difficult. But is it same for Europe? The average square foot is a little bit larger compared to some of the countries in Asia. So is it similar what you're seeing in Germany and other part of the Europe as well?
It's interesting that you're bringing up Asia in that context, because one of the, I hope my audio is better now. So I got a few comments, so
yes.
let me know if it, okay.
Much better. Thank you.
I mean, we have large offices in APAC, and this is, for example, for the Tokyo office, we thought it would be a great example. Working from home, people have 1.5 hours commute, perfect, right? And then reality is, as you said, people work in a 40 square meter apartment with their family and their grandparents, and home office is not really an option for them. So what we did here for the headquarters, for the global headquarters, was when we closed them down initially completely, and then we sent everyone home overnight, and then everyone was working from home 100%. Something we have never ever thought possible, and it worked exceptionally well. There are a couple of elements I think which helped us. I mean, part of the way we are working in our workplace concept, over 60% globally now of our workplaces are in activity-based working. So about the 21,000 office workplaces, we have about 12, 13,000 in activity-based working, including the headquarter locations. So, and as part of that, you get a mobile, you get a laptop. So people were already set up initially for working. It also certainly helps if you are working in sport goods and apparel, because the products are not that big. So even our designers and product development people could take their products home. It's probably a different challenge if you're working in the car industry. But it worked really well. What we saw was that the connection and Teams, everything was there. People were able to work, and they evaluated. We just got the results from our internal eNPS back. They valued the flexibility extremely high. So it was one of the highest elements was that they highly appreciated the flexibility of us going to 100% remote work. We are now in a stage where we actually actively ask people to come back. There are multiple, and we took a lot of effort to get the sites ready for them. So we removed thousands of chairs and desks. We took great care to not just put a sticker here, you can't sit here, but we really took care that people physically are unable to sit close to each other because there's just no chair and no desk. And again, the activity-based working concept helped us a lot because we didn't took out the desk of Steve and Petra, we took out a desk, right? And so that was a big element. But we also want to kind of find, I personally believe for us as a company, 100% remote working is not the future and is not the right approach, because I strongly believe, and that might also be the architect speaking to me, but I'm also very passionate about our workplace concepts. I strongly believe connectivity in a physical way, collaboration, bringing people together and having these chance encounters and these serendipitous moments you're creating by meeting someone on the floor, by running into someone when you're grabbing a coffee, by bumping into anyone from your lowest peer to the CEO while you walk through a building is an extremely powerful element which you don't get virtually. There is no way to have these chance encounters virtually that I'm aware of. You do have Teams calls, great, you can connect with the people, and I think it was a lifesaver that this technology is here. I think the whole situation would have looked vastly different 2 or 3 years ago. But I strongly believe that bringing people together in a safe way, but physically, is important. And I also believe that means our offices are going to change. I think if you are having a large areas with seas of desks, where you cramp in people, you are in trouble with your facilities and your portfolio. You need open spaces where people can meet and collaborate, where people can run into each other. You need services, whether it's food or a good coffee, to kind of create reasons for people to come together, creating these water holes where people come together. And I believe we will see a further shift towards what we do in the office. There's no reason for me to come to the office to do emails or PowerPoints or calls, right? I can do that from home in most cases. And we can now divert into social discussions about who are the people who are privileged in home office and who have to spend, again, their space with their parents and their kids. But that's not something which an employee needs anymore compared to 5-10 years ago. So I believe that's going to be a change we see in the future, how offices are there. And we always talked about what will be the next step in evolution of the office. I think it's here, right? We just have to understand exactly what it means, but we are at that point.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Christian. I think that really built a bridge for me to go to Cesar with regards to technology and new practices, especially what has pandemic taught us about the adoption of new practices, especially when it comes to the processes, the time it takes, or what it enables the processes, and what slows us down when it comes to technology from purely, while trying to connect the world virtually?
Well, there's a lot in that question. I think the pandemic is still teaching us. It's not done yet. We're still learning, and there's a lot to learn. It's triggered and it's fueled a lot of innovation left, right, and center, not just in the corporate sector, but even how companies reinvent themselves as they recognize that this is not a 2-3 month thing. This is actually going to be a lot longer than people initially thought. And I'm with Christian around that the purpose, the first thing we got to recognize is that the purpose of the office has changed to more or less degree. And it's not going to be the same thing for all companies, right? Every company needs to actually define what that new purpose will be. But yes, the cultural element, the social element, that's going to be a huge thing. Technology can only do so much. Technology can help build those bridges digitally that are not physically there. But it has limitations. And we have to, we are human beings after all. We like to socialize. That's where the anthropological element comes into play. So that means that, yes, absolutely, there's ways in which technology can actually help to get people into the office, to particularly help them feel a little bit safe. That's one of the reasons why people are voting with their feet when they come or don't come to the office. Because cleaning, that used to be not the biggest topic or the most interesting topic, all of a sudden is, what are we doing about cleaning? How are you keeping myself safe? How often are you disinfecting X, Y, and Z? So there's a lot of topics that have been brought to the forefront of real estate management and facilities management because of this. That has implications on real estate portfolio. What are we going to do with X much real estate? Do we want to shed off 50, 70, 60, whatever percent that may be? What is the right number? Are we going to be oversubscribing buildings? And if we do, what tools do we need to actually oversubscribe the buildings? What tools do we need to manage the air conditions in the state? So there's a lot of different questions that come out of this new normal, because it is new. That's the first thing we need to do. We need to recognize it is completely new. And what are the things that we will continue doing after this is over? Because it will be over. And when it's over, it's going to be different. The question is, what are the things that we will continue to do? And then how are we going to be solving for those things? Whether it be digitally, and that's one answer, or whether we're actually going to use an analog solution for them. It doesn't have to be a digital. Digital just helps. We're lucky enough from a Verizon perspective that all we do is networks and cybersecurity and connectivity. So we were sort of ready to do that. And we've been doing ABW for the past 10 years. So for us was a quite easy lift and shift from the office to home. We were geared for that. I mean, as I say to some people, we spent a few years building the ships and we were actually sailing. All we needed to do was just let the sails go, when other people had to actually build a ship from scratch. But it hasn't been the same for all companies. It hasn't been the same for all people. So this has triggered a lot of internal transformation, not just digital. I mean, I'm digitally biased, and I get that, but it has done a lot of deep thinking about what the future of work will actually look like and what it means. I mean, I personally, I have 2 little kids, and working from home sometimes it's a challenge. I love my noise canceling headset for that reason, but at the same time, I love it because at 5 o'clock, 5:30, I can be having dinner with them. That was impossible in the past. I could not do that, and I love the time with them. So it's actually shifted a lot of paradigms, not just about the office, but about our own personal lives.
So that's a really good point to pick up on one of the major themes that really has been commented on again and again when it came to COVID, and that's the acceleration effect. This has accelerated stuff that was happening or that was waiting to happen. And I think Nishar and I really wanted to ask you guys about that from 2 perspectives. There's technological innovation angle, and there's the organizational innovation angle. Maybe we can hear from a few of the heads of real estate and workplace on the technological acceleration first, and then we can hear a little bit of comments from Agne and Cesar on how that actually fits with their focuses on technology and on the people. Who would like to go first?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick it off. So I think when you talk about technology, I think one thing which was on my mind before, but which has definitely accelerated and is now something we're actively implementing, is the whole topic about how we track occupancy in our facilities. I mean, the technology has been out there for sensors to monitor which desks are used. I mean, it's kind of scary what you can do with some of these sensors. I mean, where you have works council, it's always an issue. So we were kind of a little bit dodging the topic, but this is something we're now going all in, because I need to know how many people I have in my facilities. I can do this, of course, with access control, but I want to know not only how many people are in, I want to know exactly where they are, to understand better how our portfolio works in the future. I firmly believe people will work more from home also when this is over, whenever that might be. But the data you can collect by understanding where people are and where people maybe aren't, by maybe why is a workplace not working in that corner, or why is the lounge not working in that corner, that helps you to optimize your space. I think that's definitely a topic which I believe will accelerate, and we're just at the beginning of the power of that opportunity, right? But then if you translate this into how often do you need to clean, and so on, how many services do you need to do, I think that's definitely something I believe will accelerate through the better need to understand how your facilities are used.
So we're sort of seeing a compounding acceleration here. You accelerate one suite of products, and then they're actually creating an accelerating effect on some others, and it becomes this virtuous cycle. Nelle or Stephen, would you like to chime in as well?
Yeah, sure. I'd actually like to build on what Christian just said. For us, we didn't have any occupancy measurement tools yet. We were looking at it for years and couldn't make up our mind because there's so many out there. But now we also see the need to start investing in that. So we're doing first pilots. The difficulty doing pilots when nobody is in the office is, of course, a bit like a chicken and egg story, but we're definitely on that same path. I think the other element is that, lucky or not, I remember I was in a pilot group to pilot the Teams functionality for Microsoft when the crisis hit. So we had bought the product, but we're still trialing it, and we're most of the time very conservative in doing pilots with small groups and then rolling it out, but we were just forced to roll it out before the first pilots were done, and it was a huge enabler, I think, for working from home. By the way, this week I am in an offsite with 300 people for 3 days, a virtual offsite through Teams, and it's really amazing what the technology is doing there. And then I think the third element that we start looking into is touchless in the workplace, because we are still on a journey to implement flexible working in ABW. I think we have about 10 to 15% of our spaces only in that setting, and we want to increase it for all office employees. So we're looking into touchless light switches, soap dispensers, door openers, but of course at the right cost. So those are elements that we can still bring in because we still have a lot of projects ahead of us. So those would be the three things I can think of in terms of technology.
Thank you. Crystal clear. Actually, in the interest of time, Stephen, would you like to comment more on organizational innovations that you're seeing happen right now? And then we will hear from Cesar and from Agne on their perspectives.
Okay, it does, though, the organizational impacts do dovetail with technology. I really do believe we're at an inflection point. Just as Cesar mentioned, there's a need to adopt the technology now. The companies are becoming risk adverse. We are worried about who comes to the office, how long they are there, who they meet while they're in the office. We were trying to control the flow of people returning. And if we ever get back to 100% occupancy, I think it will be in a much more secure and accepted environment that people may need to give up some of those works council type safety things around signing in, declaring your own health. Companies are risk adverse and worried what will happen if there's an outbreak in your particular office and the source is a person that you've allowed back in. Who's liable, what's all the liabilities. So organisations are changing that way. The Teams meetings, the calls, the Zooms, I probably see my team more now than I did in a normal working week, just because you've got visibility through the technology. And mostly pre-COVID, at any one time, half of my department would be travelling. Even more for higher in the organisation, we had a need to be somewhere all the time. No construction activity, no fit-up activity. We don't need to travel just now. We're actually connecting more. However, again, for certain organisations, the need to get together, to be together, I particularly feel for younger population that maybe are new starts to companies. They're not getting exposure to the proper company culture or the look and feel of the environment, or somebody mentioned the branding. You're not feeling truly part of Lenovo if you're just being brought in and you only ever see people through video calls. So I think organisations are adapting. I did touch on this before. Keeping our executives aligned with how real estate supports their business aspirations. That was difficult in the past, but now everybody is a real estate expert and what we should be doing in the office, and what safety measures we should put in, and adoption of technology as well could be resisted in the past. It became a budget discussion. We don't have money to implement these things. Well, now we're taking budgets from elsewhere and looking what do we need to make the environment safer. A real key thing. We need to know, and Christian talked on this. We need to know what's happening today, what's live. Where are people congregating in the office? Are there rule breakers because heat map says we see people gathering in that space and it's meant to be locked off? Or you're going the wrong way around the building after we've put in very determined signage saying you must follow this route. So whole organisations are changing. That's what I would say.
So you brought up you brought up a lot, Stephen, but one of the things that I would be very curious to hear about, Agne, from your point of view, is one that I've been hearing many people really, scratch their heads about. And I think it's something that we're also seeing more now that we've all had the chance to mature our experiences virtually, remotely, as the pandemic has hit. And that's the point about hiring. It's about hiring new people and maybe young people, maybe people that never had a job before. So they don't know how to do a job. They don't know how they are in a job. They don't know which cues to look for on the job the first time, or even which questions to ask. At the same time, on our side, maybe employing these people, we also don't know how to put ourselves in their shoes and how to lead this on. So it's a very interesting anthropological experiment, and it's one where we organizationally need to innovate. There's obviously strong technological component on this as well, but I would love to hear from you, Cesar, in a moment. And before that, Agne, do you have anything to say about that? Are you seeing ways that we can innovate to master this challenge of not letting new hires and young hires or people's growth in general get left behind? Maybe there are even ways of helping them do that better in this new normal.
I think it's spotted very, very well. It's a huge challenge. And I think no one really has a recipe that could already state that it is working. We are all experimenting, and probably the outcome, it's too soon to be described or to talk about. But absolutely, it's a huge behavioral change. And we talked already how the real estate react, our buildings, how the technology. But I think what is the biggest difference in this change is how we are adapting in our behaviors. Like, I mean, in most of the cases, we're using same technologies or same buildings, and we are the same people in the same roles. But what is changing greatly is the scale and the usage of different things. So, and I think from what I see in my company, in my organization, that even though we are working with the same tools, the purpose of technology is changing. It was, the same video call half a year ago didn't have the same importance as it has now. Now it's like one of the most common things you do during the day. And I think we are all, cooking and crafting how to welcome our new employees, how to make the hiring process different. And there is no recipe yet. And actually, our leaders are saying the same, like we are experimenting and we are trying to hear all of us what we have to say. So, and I think in this time especially, leadership comes very much into the place. It's, I guess, the important as never before, at least in the last years, to have a connection. So I think what we are seeing right now is the importance and the power of the community. It's quite complicated to stay such individualistic as we were before the pandemic, because not much you can do without the input of others. And of course, that goes even broader than we talk about new hires. So I think it's interesting to see how human-centric and more community support, the support of community becoming more and more important. We had this kind of a buzzword, on corporate real estate or on HR, the community, and it is important. But actually now I really see that in action. So maybe it's
really
at least
put a lot of these. It's put a lot of these in under real test. Maybe we developed them before, maybe they were happening, but now the accelerating effect you're talking about is really putting pressure on them, stress testing, maybe seeing things that aren't going right, picking up the feedback, collecting the data, creating a new strategy. So Cesar, on that note, I mean, you're a global head of innovation and workplace technology. Now, so you deal with innovation absolutely all the time. And I'm kind of curious, can we actually innovate even this fast? Can we really create scalable innovations at the size of, for example, Verizon's portfolio in the time between today and when we knew that the pandemic broke out? If you want to pick an example, it could be the one we just spoke about. It could be health, well-being. Just be very curious to hear about the timeline.
That's a few things that we can talk about. And the answer to that question is yes. I mean, first of all, put things in perspective. 10, 12 years ago, that's not that long ago, it's just a decade. This wasn't possible. This is what we're doing today. Wasn't possible. We had Skype. The iPhone had just been released in 2008, and that was the first generation. So where have we come from where we were 10, 12 years ago to where we are now? I've had discussions with people I had not seen in years, probably 15 to 20 years because of this technology. But I still like to go out to the pub and have a beer at the end of the day sometimes with my buddies because technology doesn't solve for that. Going back to the innovation piece, yes, innovation doesn't have to be complicated. Innovation is just finding a new way of doing things. And that can be as simple as a different process that doesn't have to be digital, or it can be a super complicated, monstrous rollout to put out sensors to manage, etc., count how many people there are. It just, and there's anything in between. We've managed to scale up. We actually produced, during the pandemic, in 3 months, we produced a couple of applications that allowed us to digitize our cleaning regimes, where we started rolling out sensors to control how our bathrooms were being utilized and counting how many people times the doors were being closed. That allows us to resource accordingly and to actually tackle the ones that were being heavily utilized. We used, you probably all seen it, those logs behind every single loo where the cleaners would come in and sign. We digitized that experience, and we produced apps, and we armed our cleaners to actually go out armed with their smartphones and then scanning QR codes and marking when something was clean in real time. So that information fed over to us pretty quickly. With a company of our scale, just so those that don't know much about Verizon, we have 100 million square feet, 6,000 locations, admin locations around the world, supporting 130,000 people. So one thing we do have scale. Anything at scale is complex. Even putting signage up, something that is very, very analog, is complex because of the size of the operation, let alone when you start thinking about sensor technology or people counting. People counting is good, and we do it a lot, and hopefully, I'm not sure if Laura's still around, but we use density in some use cases and a few other different brands. But the more important question is, what is it that we're trying to gather? What data do we need? What are we going to be using that data for? Because it may well be that the answer is not sensor technology. It's just not just expensive, it's just complex. Now, on the opposite hand is, if you asked me this question maybe 6 months ago, 7, 8 months ago, the technology in the workplace was a nice to have. And only a few companies, there was a classic, hey, how do you justify your ROI? There was a lot of focus on technology, on energy savings, and which is good because that's easy to measure. Now, technology is seen as a must-have. How are you going to keep the people safe? How are you going to actively manage your operations? And that is a key thing, because it's being very precise about the data that you need to be able to do something with it and act on that data. Not just collect data for the sake of collecting data's sake. The best parallel that we have, and this is how we think about these things, is with the airline industry, actually the hospitality industry. They do active capacity management. They do run promotions on their hotels so that they don't have peaks and troughs, and we all have that. We all have very low Mondays and very low Fridays, and it usually goes up. How do you manage that? Is a people counter going to help you manage it? No, it's just going to tell you what happened. It's going to probably help you predict what's going to happen, but it's not going to let you manage it. The question here for us is, how do you manage that? How do you make sure that you flatten the curve? That you have your buildings being used at the max capacity at the vast majority of the time, because at that point you're running efficient operations. But then you're also giving the chance to the people to come into the office, and you don't have those that cannot come on a Monday or that cannot come on a Friday for whatever reason, the opportunity not to do that. So there's a lot of things that need to be thought about, the data that is going to be collected, how are you going to be using the data, and only then think about what are the solutions that you need to actually implement to collect that data. That's the last thing. Unfortunately, technology is too cool to be ignored, and it's the sexy topic. But sometimes asking yourself the question about what you want to do with it is more important than actually deploying a simple sensor that may actually not deliver what you need it to deliver. What we do think, however, is that the facilities management of today is not going to be the facilities manager of tomorrow. The facilities manager of tomorrow will be a data scientist, will be someone that actually can predict and can build algorithms. That's what we call it, the algorithmic buildings. We'll build algorithms that will actually help predictive analytics to change and to dynamically change the capacity of the building based on the past history. And you need tons of data. You need to train the algorithms for that. but that's not immediate. That's probably 3 to 5 years from now. The now is what are the small incremental innovations that can be done to help us manage and get back to work quicker on our feet.
Absolutely. I think you mentioned energy as well, Cesar, in your conversation, and that itself is a topic by itself. And I would point out to Nelle, because I think, Nelle, in our earlier conversations, you mentioned about some escalations in terms of sustainability commitments during these pandemic. I think they were super motivating and inspiring for other organizations. So if you could share thoughts with the world here, that would be really insightful.
Yeah, sure. It's a bit broader than corporate real estate, but indeed our company has expressed, I think about a month ago, that we will go carbon neutral in scope 1, 2, and 3 by 2030, which is a quite challenging target to hit. But I do think corporate real estate can play a major role in that. And one of the things that we are now looking into, and I think Agne probably has a specific view on that as well, being so people-oriented, is if you go to work more from home and you take away dedicated seats. Remember, we still come very much from I have a dedicated seat in the office. So the opportunity we have to change our footprint is actually also a tremendous opportunity to do something good for the environment, because every square meter we need less is X amount of carbon footprint that we produce less as a company. So we are now looking into how can we combine these two elements and also inspire our associates to say, by you being more flexible in where you work, you help in contributing by your own behavior. And also that ties into what Cesar was just saying. How can we flatten this curve that we don't need to keep the big office space because everybody does come in on Tuesday to Thursday, but that we can flatten it further so people come in Monday to Friday. We even have thought about crazy ideas. Maybe there's people who like to come over the weekend. So can you even spread your utilization further? Because quite honestly, 2 out of 7 days, all these offices are empty. So all of that, I think if you link it to sustainability and to your promise to do good for the planet in total, puts things in a total different perspective that nobody thought of 6 months ago.
That is a very inspiring note to close this part of the session. And we'll now turn it towards the audience. And I think one of the first questions came from Larry Charlip, who I know has been accelerating some of his own sustainability efforts during this period. But Larry, would you go ahead and unmute yourself, put on the video if you want, and share your question?
Hi, sorry about that. Looks like I can't start my video. But anyway, my question was, it seems so long ago already that I wrote it, just so that it seems like cases in Europe are escalating quickly, and that guidance early on, and even now in parts of Europe, particularly in the UK, for lack of a better term, have been vague. Something Stephen had mentioned about if companies have the ability to work from home, they should work from home. As a government guidance is relatively vague, because how do you judge that? And then the opening of Europe seemed to escalate quickly in August, which also coincided with the European holiday season, summer holiday season, and are now seeing a rise in the cases, and we're starting to see those vague directions again to try to slow things down. So I was wondering what companies are doing to interpret those or even go above what the government is asking for.
Let me take that. I would say that most of the companies that I follow and know through CoreNet and many of our peers, companies are more stable and more in control than purely following the government guidelines. we've had some places that reopened, in my opinion, too quickly, followed all the rules, but still see an uprising in number of cases. And in our own company, we had some affected individuals. But I thought, you ask how you can measure it, and I've actually seen lots of data coming out, a couple of companies that map out the commute, the return to the high street, the return to the office. They've got many data points that they're gathering, and you can see which cities went back, you could argue, too early, and you can see the effect of the August holiday season going into September, and then 15 days, 20 days later, you'll have spikes in another country that, you know, people cross the border all the time. So we see all of that, but I do think companies are being more responsible than just following the government mandates or guidelines. I would also say, and this might be a bit more controversial, but many companies have stated, we've asked people to come back, it's their own free choice, but the majority don't want to come back. And it comes down to personal circumstances, looking after kids, looking after older parents. But I would say, and this is anecdotal, but I speak to lots of different people in different countries. People are more afraid of the commute than being in the office. The thought of being on a packed underground or on a bus with 30 other people for a half-hour journey, these things are more, people are reluctant around those things. Just one other thing, when Nelle and Cesar talked about sustainability, you cannot buy, across Europe, you cannot buy a bike, a cycle. They are completely sold out. People change their mode of transport. There are a lot of cities that are predominantly pedestrianised or public transport only. No cars can come in. So we see that shift as well. And I'm convinced some company will come out of this and say our green credentials went up, we consumed less energy, we're on track to accelerate carbon neutral aspirations, and I think there'll be winners who actually say we've changed our whole thinking around impact to the environment and the planet. That's just an aside, but did that answer it, Larry?
Yeah, I think so. Just kind of as a follow-up, and something I just typed in, because you had mentioned about moving towards carbon neutral. In the US, I heard a stat last week that said with 95% drop in occupancy during the lockdown, buildings were only seeing about a 40% drop in operating expense, which coincides with the amount of energy usage that these buildings are using, where you would have expected to see a much higher drop. And I was wondering if you guys are seeing the same thing in Europe as we are here, and we're trying to figure out why that is. Obviously, buildings here in the US are operating at max capacity, even with a 95, or look at it a different way, with a 5% occupancy rate.
Yeah, I've seen similar statistics. Certain, not buildings within Lenovo, but just studies that have been published, and the overall impact of buildings on the environment, how you might have expected much greater reduction in energy consumption. But for a lot of buildings, they've got to be maintained and operated at a certain level. You actually can't switch off the systems. You can't. I think the biggest winners are the smart buildings that have got all of the technology that monitors every aspect of every element of the building operations. I think they're the biggest winners. But it's not. I'll tell you something that drives me crazy. If I drive by a building at night and the lights are on, it cracks me up. cracks me up. I just think what a waste of energy, light, emissions. I go mad. So yeah, all of
Yeah,
that.
maybe Larry, I cannot. We've had these discussions internally as well. That especially procurement asks us why are the costs not dropping more? I think there's two elements. One is what Stephen already mentioned, right? You need to, so whether it was in summer and it's very humid and you have to keep some of the air conditioning on to not create mold in the buildings. But then also, if you have one occupant in the building, you need to keep the infrastructure running, right? So if you don't close the building fully, you cannot close down the operations. On the other hand, in buildings where we do have occupancy, and I know it's controversial and people say it's like this or like this, but we follow the theory that you need to increase your air circulation to make sure that bacteria and whatever don't get stuck in rooms. So you have an increased infrastructure utilization in those buildings that are still populated. And I don't know the statistic, but if OPEX also includes depreciation, which for us, for instance, in our own campuses is the biggest portion of costs, of course, your depreciation doesn't go away, right? You're still depreciating your buildings. But I think it has a lot of nuances, these running costs.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think there's one more very interesting question, which is supposed to be part of our question, but we ran out of the time. And I'm glad audience, somebody from audience has asked this. I think Astig, you have a question regarding large campuses and the footprint and decentralized presence and centralized presence. Do you want to unmute yourself and go ahead? I know you've been part of Siemens CRE group, so it will be.
Oh, well, thank you for this opportunity. Such a great group. There's no doubt we're all moving in the right direction, and I think we'll figure out our path, however that workplace ends up. And in my mind, the thing that keeps keeping me up at night thinking, what is the future of our large headquarters and our campuses? I'm actually in California, and I've seen Silicon Valley evolve, and it's like my campus is bigger than yours. I've got better tricks and things in my campus, and there's always been this competition. I'm just curious, anybody have any thoughts yet on how does that evolve? Is there an effect on our branding, having that presence in any particular city?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. I'm quite passionate about our campuses we have. So I do believe the campus or the HQ as a place to go to will stay. It might even get more important because, I mean, if you spend a couple of days only per week or maybe even per month in one location, it might be better be a location which really connects you to your brand and to the company you're working for. I mean, the whole topic about being able to work 100% remotely has an effect on loyalty, right? It's even easier for you now to work for a different company. The company even doesn't even have to be in the same city, state, or country even. So I believe as employers and from a corporate side, I believe these spaces are very important from a branding perspective. I think they need the expectation of the employees and of us needs to be even higher. So these places really need to work and really need to offer something for employees to come to. I think the size might change. You might no longer need a campus for 10,000 people if only 5,000 show up every day. So then you will need to think about the size. But I think the element of the campus or a space where you bring multiple people together in different buildings on a shared branded corporate space, I believe it has even more energy than before, because if you go to the office, I want to make sure our employees come to a space they really feel connected to and really gives them something back and creates a reason for them to come back tomorrow. Because we also see this ripple effect. If you come to the office and there's no one there, and you meet no one, you will not come back tomorrow. Right? So I want to create the situation you actually come and you want to come back tomorrow because of the services, because of the design, the branding, and of the people you meet.
Very well said. I think we have one more question from Ankit. Ankit, do you want to go for it? This could be the last one for the panel.
Yeah, thanks, Nishar, and a great group again, and I think a lot of insights today. My question is generally more on, so short term, I understand from Cesar and most of the people on panel that it's more technology which really accelerated the short term or the now, or addressing the now in terms of the virtual aspect of it. But how does this really pan out when it comes to mid and long term, where really the measurement or the physical products existing in the building would really connect to the technology side of it, right? So because ultimately the buildings where we work or what we build does have a physical products like doors or windows or so on and so forth. So where do you see the technology infusement will happen? And the second question is, who would be really responsible? Is it the product manufacturers / suppliers, or it will be more collaborative approach with the corporate real estate people?
Okay, so let's try to answer the first question. Is technology, our general approach to tech is that it has to be invisible for the people. It has to just work. We try to remove any kind of friction between the employee, the person interacting with the space, and we just make it invisible. What I like what Christian was saying, I mean, the office is not dead. The office is probably more alive than ever. It's even more relevant than before because of the social and human connections. But yes, there will be pieces of tech. We're investing heavily in room booking systems or desk booking systems, I would say, these days. We used to have activity-based workplace, which we called a self-assigned seating. So you would just show up to the office and assign yourself to a desk, and that was yours for the day to keep. Now we're actually going to have a more specific approach where we will be asking people to book their stuff. The experience is going to be very similar to when you go to a hotel, and everybody's familiar with it. You book your hotel. First of all, you decide where you want to go. Then you book your hotel, right? Once you get to the hotel, you check in, right? That allows us to get an indication of who's going to come in up front, which groups are going to come in. We can do predictive analytics on top of that. And not just that, we can manage the demand as well. We can manage how many desks we open or shrink, depending on what we want to do in the building. That also means that we can then open or close different sections of the building. Our buildings are not 100% smart. It would cost millions of dollars, probably billions, to actually make all of our real estate portfolio smart. But there are solutions out there in which you can very easily inject technology or inject intelligence that will allow you to start retrofitting using wireless tech to allow you to start getting towards, and I want to say smart building because I think that's a very old-fashioned term, but getting towards a more algorithmic type building where you can actually start building algorithms on top of it to manage, control things. But that's going to be a journey. I mean, what we're doing now, we're not investing as a general rule from our side of the house. We're not investing heavily in technology that is short shelf lived. So it's stuff that we will be disposing of in the next 12 months, maybe 18 months. That's going to disappear. Right? So do we want to fit every single one of our locations with a $3,000-$4,000 automated face scanner that we will be disposing of and we will not know what to do? Well, that's not very environmentally efficient, number one. Two, it's probably not the best use of our money. And three, it's going to disappear in the very near future. Near, less than 2 years. Yeah, hopefully. So we're investing in the stuff and we're deploying technologies that will last longer, that will last probably the next 5 to 10 years. And that's when we're saying, how is virtual reality going to affect us? How can we actually use this different technology to bring us together in a different way? How can we use these room booking systems that will tell us, or I would say more general booking systems that will tell us who's coming, when can we predict HR to come into the office? HR don't know. Usually they have 40 desks, but actually on a Tuesday, we know that the pattern is they use 20. So we can free 20 desks back to the pool and do a lot of things that we could not do before. Yes, before someone says it, I think Stephen mentioned this, that there's a privacy piece, GDPR compliance. Sure, that's all true, but we're actually doing it for a purpose. So we're not just using the data for data's sake or knowing who it is, but there's a balance between how much we want to know about an individual versus how much we actually need to know. So there's going to be our technology stack has about 18 different technology solutions that are implemented across our footprint. Are we going to implement them, every single one of them everywhere? No, that would cost too much. But we are very specific about what we do where. The best example is we tackle this as laparoscopic surgery. 50 years ago, maybe 30 years ago, you were looking, the surgeon would actually do an X-ray and would roughly guess what you had, and it was not until they got to the operating theater to actually figure it out. By that time, he didn't have the right surgeon with him. Now we are doing, we have CT scans, we have all different call data analytics before the patient even hits the OR. And even if they do, they use a very tiny hole to come in, do the operation, and you're out in minutes. Recovery is super quick, risk is super low, but you are gathering a lot of data up front. Same approach in buildings. You gather as much as you can up front to then operationalize that implementation of technology. So it's just a different way of thinking and looking more long-term than short, because there's going to be a lot of reaction times. My point would be just don't invest too heavily in the things that will last for not too long.
Thank you.
And what is not a better phrase than to end on that one as we finish up these 1.5 hours together. With that, on behalf of CoreNet New York, first of all, we would really like to thank all of you panelists for dedicating your time to prepare this and to spend your precious attention to answering all of our questions. I hope that we've created a stronger bond, a transatlantic bond here, where you feel welcome to reach out to us in New York, and where us New Yorkers feel free to also connect with the panelists after the event. In terms of all of the people that were not able to make this, people that you might want to share this with later, we will circulate material, whether it's recording or in some more written format. There will be stuff to reference, so please look out for that. And for the rest, I wish everyone in Europe a good night and everyone in the States a good rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.